My name is Darius. For 28 years, that was just a name on my identity document, a word my parents chose when I was born in the Shemiran neighborhood in northern Tehran. But today, when I say who I am, that name carries a completely different meaning. Today, I am a follower of Jesus Christ. And if you ask me how I got here, I need to tell you about 7 minutes that turned my existence upside down and showed me that there is something far beyond what my eyes can see. My childhood was marked by the scent of the Persian roses my mother cultivated in the small garden of our house. It was a simple construction, of stone and brick, but it held so much love within those walls. The Alborz Mountains dominated the northern horizon, always covered in snow on their peaks, as if they were watching over every movement of the city. I used to look at them and wonder what lay beyond those giant peaks. My father, Ahmad, spent his days in the Grand Bazaar selling carpets. He wasn't much of a talker, but his religious convictions spoke louder than any words. His hands, marked by years of working with threads and fabrics, would be raised towards Mecca 5 times a day, without fail. At night, his voice would echo through the house as he recited surahs from the Quran. It was almost like a lullaby that filled our nights. My mother, Sarah, had honey-colored eyes that seemed to light up when she prepared tea in the antique copper samovar that had belonged to her grandmother. The scent of saffron and cardamom filled every room, bringing that feeling of warmth that only home can provide. She was the one who taught me my first prayers. I still remember sitting beside her, repeating each sacred word as her lips moved gently, full of devotion. Islam wasn't just a religion for my family. It was literally everything. It shaped how we lived, how we thought, how we saw the world, and I grew up completely immersed in it. But when I entered adolescence, something started stirring inside me. It wasn't rebellion, nothing like that. It was more like a restlessness, you know? A thirst for something I couldn't even explain properly, but it was there, growing in my chest. When I turned 18, I enrolled at the University of Tehran to study civil engineering. My father had always dreamed of it, and I also wanted to make him proud. That's where I met Kabe. Man, that guy had something different. The way he looked at things, the tranquility he exuded. It was strange, in a good way. It seemed like he carried a good secret hidden inside him. We started having lunch together almost every day. We talked about classes, about politics, about life, and every now and then the subject of religion came. The interesting thing is that Kabe never tried to push anything on me. He just listened to my questions with impressive patience and answered in such a different way. While I spoke of a distant, powerful, and fearsome God, he spoke of a close father, full of love, who truly cared about every detail of our lives. One autumn afternoon, he looked at me more seriously and said, "Darius, would you like to meet some of my friends? They're special people who have discovered something very beautiful." My heart raced. I knew, deep down, that accepting that invitation meant crossing a threshold of no return. But that thirst for truth that consumed me was stronger than any fear. The house was on a narrow street in the Yusuf Abad neighborhood, hidden behind high walls. When we arrived, Kabe knocked on the door in a specific way, as if it were a code. A woman in her 50s opened it, glanced quickly both ways, and urgently pulled us inside. The scent of olive oil and incense filled the air, but there was something more. A peace I had never felt before, as if those walls breathed serenity. In the main room, about 12 people were seated in a circle on Persian rugs. What immediately struck me was the variety of faces. There were young people like me, university students, mothers wearing hijabs, businessmen in suits. But everyone, absolutely everyone, had something in common. A sparkle in their eyes that I had never seen in the mosques I had frequented my entire life. When they began to sing, I was paralyzed. The voices blended in a harmony that seemed to descend from heaven. They sang in Farsi, my own language, but the words spoke of things I had never heard in that. Unconditional love, grace, a savior who came to seek the lost. "Jesus, your name is sweet as honey," they sang. And there, for the first time in my life, I heard that name pronounced with such affection, with such reverence in my mother tongue. That night, a man named Reza told his story. His voice trembled as he spoke of how he had found Jesus in the midst of a terrible crisis, of how he had experienced a love he didn't need to, a grace that didn't depend on anything. "He didn't ask me to be perfect," Reza said, his eyes filled with, "He only asked me to come just as I was." Those words echoed inside me like thunder. It was exactly what I had been searching for without knowing it. During the following weeks, I began to secretly return to the house. Every Friday night, I would make up an excuse that I was going to study at the library and rush to Yusufabad's, my heart racing and my palms sweating. There I learned about who Jesus really was, about how he loved the outcasts of society, about the sacrifice he made on the cross. But most importantly, I began to feel something different. There was a presence in that place. It wasn't something I could measure or explain with the logic of the engineering I studied, but it was as real as the ground beneath my feet, as real as my own heartbeat. The night of my conversion arrived unexpectedly. I was lying in my bed, alone in my room, when everything I had heard and felt in those weeks came together in a single moment of absolute clarity. Jesus was not just another prophet, as I had always been taught. He was the Son of God. He was the bridge between me and the Creator. He was the answer my heart had been crying out to find. Tears began to fall uncontrollably as I whispered a simple prayer that changed everything. Jesus, if you are truly who they say you are, come into my heart. I want to truly know you. The peace that washed over me at that moment is impossible to describe in words. It was as if I had spent my whole life walking in the dark, stumbling, trying to find my way, and suddenly someone turned on a light so bright that it illuminated not only the path, but my entire being. I slept that night with a tranquility I never felt before, and when I woke up, my life would never be the same again. My baptism took place in a secluded house on the outskirts of Tehran. The brothers had installed a small pool in the basement for such occasion. The water was cold, but when the pastor spoke the words, "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit," and submerged me, I felt a warmth spreading from my chest to my whole body. When I came out of the water, with it dripping from my hair, I knew the old Darius had stayed down there. What emerged was a new creation. But along with all that joy came an enormous weight, the secret. I couldn't tell my family. I couldn't explain why the ritual prayers I'd done since childhood no longer made sense to me. Every Friday I watched my father getting ready to go to the mosque, and my heart ached. It wasn't contempt for what he believed. It was love, a love so great that it hurt not being able to share with him the treasure I had found. How could I explain to him that I had found something much bigger, something that embraced him too in this endless love? My mother noticed the change before anyone. One morning, while preparing breakfast and breaking bread with those skillful hands honed over so many years in the kitchen, she stopped, looked deep into my eyes, and said, "There's something different about you. Your eyes. There's a light there that I've never seen before." My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. It was terror and joy at the same time. Terror because I could be discovered. Joy because the transformation Jesus had made in me was so real that even my own mother could see it. The following months were like walking a tightrope. By day, I was the well-behaved son my parents had always known. By night, I immersed myself in the pages of the Farsi Bible that Kabe had gotten for me. I hid it under my mattress, as if it were the greatest treasure, and it truly was. It was during this time that a desire began to grow within, which at first I thought was just the excitement of a new convert, an urgency to share what I had discovered. I simply couldn't keep it to myself. When I walked the streets of Tehran, I saw in people's faces that same desperate search I had felt before. Empty eyes searching for something beyond mechanical prayers and lifeless rituals, and my heart ached for them. They needed to know Jesus as much as I had needed to. The decision to start distributing Bibles didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of months of prayer, of hushed conversations with my brothers and sisters in the secret church, of sleepless nights where I felt God's calling burning inside me like an unquenchable fire. Reza, who had become my spiritual mentor, warned me about the risks. "Brother," he said with the seriousness of someone who had already paid a high price for following Jesus, "this is not only dangerous, it could cost you your life. In our country, distributing Christian material is considered a crime against the state." But his warning, however sincere, couldn't extinguish that fire. One night, while praying on the terrace of our house, watching the lights of Tehran spread to the mountains, I heard something in my heart. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was more real than any sound. "Go and make disciples." Preparing for this mission took months of meticulous planning. Through the underground Christian network, we obtained Bibles in Farsi printed abroad and smuggled in. The books arrived in small quantities, hidden in commercial shipments or in the suitcases of brothers traveling from Armenia or Turkey. Each Bible was treated as the most precious object in the world because we knew that it wasn't just paper, it was hope. It was eternal life for whoever read it. We developed intelligent ways to distribute them. It wasn't simply a matter of handing out books everywhere. It was a delicate art that required discernment, courage, and total dependence on the Holy Spirit to guide us. We identified people who demonstrated spiritual hunger, the shop owner, who asked profound questions about the meaning of life, the university student who questioned the ready-made answers he had always heard, the mother who sought hope amidst suffering. My main territory became the Grand Bazaar of Tehran, the labyrinth of alleyways and shops where my father worked his whole life. I knew every corner, every vendor, every hidden nook where you could have a private conversation without being interrupted. I created a system of codes and signals. The phrase, "Have you found the peace you seek?" became my way of starting deeper conversations. I remember as if it were yesterday the first person who received a Bible from my hands. It was a young carpenter named Mehdi, whose hands were calloused from working with wood so much, but he crafted pieces with almost artistic precision. For weeks I noticed a deep sadness. His eyes seemed to carry an invisible weight that no one else could see. One day, while I was looking at some decorative sculptures on his workbench, we started talking about beauty and the purpose of art. "Brother," I told him, "I just discovered a book that talks about the supreme artist, the one who created not only the wood you work with, but the heart that beats in your chest." His eyes lit up with a curiosity I couldn't ignore. That afternoon, in a quiet alley behind the bazaar, I handed him my first Bible. His hands trembled as he received it, as if he were touching sacred fire. "What exactly is this?" he asked, almost whispering. "It's the story of God's love for you," I replied, feeling my own heart race. "It's the answer to all the questions you ask yourself in your workshop." Mehdi not only became my first spiritual son, but he also became one of the most courageous collaborators I have ever known. Months after giving his life to Jesus, he began using his workshop as a meeting point for other seekers. He would carve discrete crosses into his work, as a secret sign for the initiated. The university also became a fertile ground. The students, with their curious minds and openness to change, received the gospel in a special way. I set up a mentoring system disguised as study group. Amidst engineering books and mathematical formulas, we shared Bible verses written on scraps of paper, passing them from hand to hand as if they were hidden treasures. One of the most striking memories from that time was seeing Nasreen, a literature student who had received the Gospel of John, weeping with joy when she understood that Jesus loved her exactly as she was. "All my life," she told me, her face wet with tears, "I've been told that God was angry with me, that I had to earn his love. But Jesus has already paid for it. I am free." Her transformation was so radical that other students began asking what had changed in her. Each Bible I distributed was a seed planted with prayer and hope. Not all sprouted quickly, but I knew that the Word of God does not return empty. The underground Christian network grew in a way I never imagined. We had more than 50 active people in different parts of Tehran. We communicated using telephone codes, changed houses for each meeting to avoid creating patterns, and developed security systems that protected us from being discovered. But the more the network grew, the more vulnerable we became, and the greatest danger came from where I least expected it, from within our own circle. Jamshid was a recent convert who showed enormous enthusiasm for the faith, but there was something about him that bothered me. His questions were far too specific. His interest in meeting other believers was too insistent. Reza advised me to be careful with him, but in my naivete, I thought he was being paranoid. "The love of Christ leads us to trust," I told Reza one night, after a meeting where Jamshid had asked too many questions about our distribution methods. "We can't live in constant suspicion." My words ended up being both an expression of faith and a harbinger of my own downfall. March 15, 2019 began like any other day. The spring air carried the scent of almond blossoms, and the mountains rose clean and imposing against the blue sky. It was Friday, the day of congregational prayers, when the Grand Bazaar filled with people heading to the nearby mosques. I had chosen this date on purpose, knowing it would be easier to blend into the crowd. I carried a backpack with 15 Bibles carefully wrapped in gift paper to conceal the contents. My plan was simple: distribute the books among established contacts, people who had expressed a specific interest in learning more about Jesus. These were pre-arranged meetings, nothing random, which in theory made the operation safer. My first encounter was with Ali, a spice vendor whose stall was right in the heart of the bazaar. His eyes lit up when he saw me arriving, and discreetly he gestured for me to follow him to the back of the shop, where the bags of saffron and cardamom. The exchange was quick: a Bible for a smile and the promise of a prayer. "God bless you, brother," he whispered, as he hid the book among his merchandise. My second encounter was with Mariam, a young nurse who worked at the nearby public hospital. We met at a small cafe in the bazaar, pretending to be old friends catching up. While we drank tea and ate Persian sweets, I discreetly handed her the Gospel of John wrapped in newspaper. Her eyes filled with tears of gratitude, and for a moment I feared her emotion would draw attention. It was on the third meeting that everything fell apart. Jamshid had asked me to meet him near the south entrance of the bazaar, claiming he had a friend interested in the faith. Something in his voice on the phone seemed strange to me, but I attributed my discomfort to the normal nervousness of that kind of situation. When I arrived at the meeting point, Jamshid was there as agreed, but he wasn't alone. Beside him was a man I had never seen before, wearing a dark suit that clashed completely with the informal atmosphere of the bazaar. His eyes were cold, calculating. When he saw me approaching, his expression lacked the friendly curiosity I would expect from someone interested in the gospel. "Darius," Jamshid said in a tense voice, "that's my friend Hussein. He's very interested in the book you..." Something about that whole scene wasn't right. The Holy Spirit had planted a strong warning in me, but my desire to share the gospel overcame my prudence. I took a Bible from my backpack, but before I could hand it over, I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Darius Josini," an authoritative voice called out behind me. "You need to come with us." I turned around and came face to face with 3 men in plain clothes, their faces as hard as stone. One of them discreetly showed me an identification that confirmed my worst nightmare: Ministry of Intelligence and National Security. My heart stopped for a second before racing uncontrollably. "Oh, this is a misunderstanding," I began to say, but the man who seemed to be the leader shook his head. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Josini. We know exactly what you're doing." His eyes went straight to my backpack. "Can we see what's inside?" The bazaar, which seconds before had teemed with movement and noise, seemed to have frozen around us. The nearby merchants pretended to be busy with their wares, but I felt their curious and frightened stares. Jamshid had disappeared into the crowd, confirming what I already knew. I had been betrayed. With trembling hands, I opened the backpack. The agents examined the contents with a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. 14 Bibles in Farsi, carefully wrapped like gifts for hungry souls, had now become evidence of my crime. "Distribution of illegal religious literature," murmured one of the agents while leafing through one of the Bibles. "Unauthorized missionary activities. Possible religious sedition." Each accusation fell upon me like a hammer, but strangely, along with the fear, I felt a supernatural peace, as if Jesus were right there beside me. The arrest was discreet, but firm. They handcuffed my hands behind my back and escorted me to a black van parked on a side street. As I walked between the officers, my eyes lifted to the blue sky of Tehran, and I whispered a silent prayer. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." The drive to Evin prison was a silent journey through the familiar streets of my city. I looked out the darkened window, watching the places of my childhood pass by as if for the last time. The park where I played as a child, the school where I learned to read, the mosque where I prayed before encountering. Everything seemed to be saying goodbye to me. Evin prison stood like a gray fortress against the sky, its high walls crowned with barbed wire that gleamed menacingly under the sun. I had heard stories about this place, whispers about what happened behind those walls, but nothing prepared me for the reality of walking through those gates as a prisoner. The admission process was dehumanized, deliberately humiliating. They took all my belongings. "So you're one of them," one of the guards said with a cruel smile. "Let's see how long your faith lasts in here." My cell was a claustrophobic space measuring 2 by 3 meters, with concrete walls stained with damp and a small window that let in only a sliver of light. The air was heavy, thick, with the smell of cheap disinfectant mixed with the sweat and despair of everyone who had occupied that space before me. A small metal bed with a thin mattress and a torn blanket was all the furniture. That first night in Evin was the longest night of my life. Lying on that hard bed, listening to the distant sounds of other prisoners echoing through the corridor, I tried to process everything that had happened. My ministry had ended in an instant. My family would soon find out about the arrest, and my future was a complete unknown. But in the midst of all that physical and emotional darkness, I felt a presence I couldn't deny. Jesus was there with me in that cell. The interrogations began the next day. They took me to a windowless room, lit by fluorescent lights that flickered constantly. In the center was a metal table surrounded by 3 chairs, 1 for me, 2 for my interrogators. The man leading the process introduced himself simply as Commander Muradi. He was middle-aged, with gray eyes that seemed to pierce into one's soul. "Mr. Josini," he began in a deceptively gentle voice, "we are here to help you. Your cooperation can make this process much easier for everyone." He placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were photos and documents that I immediately recognized. They were evidence of my missionary work over the past 2 years. The photographs showed me in a completely different light. There I was, distributing Bibles at the bazaar, meeting with converts in cafes, leading Bible studies in homes. They had been watching me for months, documenting my every move, building a solid case against me. Seeing my ministry reduced to evidence of crime broke my heart. "Impressive," Muradi said, flipping through the photo. "You've been quite busy, haven't you? Distributing Christian literature, converting Muslims, establishing illegal religious cells." His tone was casual, but his eyes gleamed with a dangerous intensity. "I was just sharing my faith," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't force anyone to believe in anything. I only offered the opportunity to get to know Jesus." Muradi's expression hardened. "In the Islamic Republic of Iran, sharing your Christian faith with Muslims is apostasy. It's sedition. It's a crime against the state and against God." He leaned forward, his face inches from mine. "We want the names of all your contacts, the addresses of all the houses where you met, the complete details of your distribution network." In the following days, the interrogations intensified. They showed me photos of my brothers and sisters in faith, some of whom I myself had led to Christ. Seeing their faces become targets of persecution broke my heart. Muradi and his team used sophisticated psychological techniques, alternating between threats and promises, trying to break my resistance. "Look at this picture," Muradi said, placing in front of me the image of Mehdi, the carpenter who had been my first convert. "We know he has a Bible. We know he meets with others in his workshop. One word from him, and we can prevent his family from suffering the consequences of his action." The threats against my spiritual family were more painful than any physical torture they could inflict on. Seeing the faces of those I had led to Christ, now transformed into targets of persecution, filled me with devastating guilt. Had I been irresponsible in involving these people? Had my zeal put them in danger? "I have nothing to say," I repentlessly. My lips were cracked from dryness, but my heart was firm. I wasn't going to betray innocent people. Muradi's frustration was visible. For an entire week, they tried to break me down with words alone, but my silence remained unwavering. That's when they decided to change their strategy. The interrogation sessions grew longer, the lights brighter, the questions more aggressive. They deprived me of sleep, keeping me awake for days on end with constant lights and a deafening noise that never stopped. But in the midst of all this torment, something extraordinary had to happen. In the most difficult moments, when I felt my resistance was about to collapse, a gentle voice echoed in my heart, "Fear not, for I am with you." These were the words of Isaiah 41:10, a verse I had memorized in my early days as a Christian, and which now became my anchor in the storm. One night, or perhaps it was daytime, I'd already lost track of time, they took me back to my cell after a particularly brutal interrogation. I collapsed onto the bed, my body trembling with exhaustion, my mind clouded with fatigue. It was then that I saw something that changed everything. On the opposite wall, barely visible in the dim light, someone had carved a small cross with their fingernail. Tears streamed down my face as I touched that rough yet powerful mark. Another follower of Jesus had been in that same cell. He had faced the same terror. He had held on to the same faith. I was not alone. Across time and space, I was connected to a brotherhood of suffering that extended all the way to the very cross of Christ. That night, I prayed like never before, not only for my liberation, but for strength to remain faithful, for protection from my brothers and sisters in faith, for wisdom to face whatever lay ahead. "Jesus," I whispered in the darkness, "if I must suffer for your name, help me to do so with dignity. But if my time on earth is not yet over, show me the way." On the 10th day of my imprisonment, Muradi entered my cell with an expression I had never seen before. His face displayed a mixture of anger and determination that filled me with a spine-chilling fear. "Mr. Josini," he said in a dangerously calm voice, "we have been very patient with, but our patience has its limits." He led me to a different room, larger than the usual interrogation room. In the center was a metal chair with leather straps, and on the sides, instruments that I preferred not to even look at properly. The message was clear. Words were over. Now came physical persuasion. "Last chance," Muradi said as two guards fastened me to the chair. "The names, the addresses, the methods, everything. I can only give one answer," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "Jesus is Lord. He is the only way to the Father. That is the only truth I have to offer." The beating started like a drizzle and turned into a storm. Fists struck my face, my chest, my ribs. Each impact was an explosion of pain that coursed through my entire body. But strangely, my mind began to drift away from the physical suffering and focus on something deeper. Amidst the blows, I began to see the face of Jesus, superimposed on the violence. His eyes, full of love and compassion, gazed at me. "That's why I suffered for you," his eyes seemed to say. "Now you suffer. We are one in this suffering." The guards finally grew tired, but Muradi wasn't finished. "Bring the cables," and my heart sank. I'd heard of this technique before. Electrical wires connected to sensitive parts of the body. Shocks that could break even the strongest will without leaving permanent marks. The first electric shock was like being struck by lightning. My whole body convulsed, my muscles contracted violently, and a scream escaped my lips before I could hold it back. The pain was indescribable, an agony that penetrated every fiber of my being. "The names!" Muradi shouted over my moans. "Give me the names!" But even as the shocks continued, a supernatural force began to fill me. It was as if Jesus himself were absorbing some of the pain, as if his presence were a shield protecting my soul, even while my body was being tortured. The words of Psalm 23 began to flow from my lips. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The torture session lasted for hours, but it felt like days. Muradi alternated between electric shocks and beatings, searching for the breaking point that never came. My body was destroyed, my face swollen to the point of being unrecognizable, my ribs probably fractured, but my spirit remained intact. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, the torturers stopped. Muradi came close to my face, his warm breath brushing my ear. "This isn't over, Josini. We start again tomorrow, and we'll continue until you give us what we want." They untied me from the chair and dragged me back to the cell. My body was too weak to walk on its own. Every breath was a struggle, every movement, agony. They left me lying on the cold concrete floor, my wounds staining the surface. That night, lying there, I experienced something I can only describe as the tangible presence of God. It wasn't a feeling, it was a reality. Jesus was there with me, as real as the pain I felt, as present as the tears streaming down my bruised face. My faithful servant heard his voice in my heart. You have run the race. You have fought the good fight. You have kept the faith. His words filled me with a peace that transcended all physical suffering, a certainty that everything had a purpose, that my pain was not in vain. But my body, despite its spiritual strength, had physical limits. The combination of days without proper nutrition, sleep deprivation, extreme emotional stress, and recent physical violence had brought my body to the brink of collapse. My heart, which had beaten strongly for 28 years, began to show signs of extreme fatigue. I felt the first symptom that morning, a sharp pain in my chest that radiated down my left arm. At first, I thought it was just another consequence of the blows, but the pain had a different quality, deeper, more sinister. My breathing became labored, and a cold sweat began to cover my body. In the following hours, the pain intensified. It was as if a steel band was tightening around my chest, crushing my heart with every beat. I tried to call the guards, but my voice barely came out, just a hoarse whisper. The world began to spin around me. The cell walls seemed to close in on me. Around noon, my heart finally stopped beating. The last beat was like a sigh, a relief after so much effort. The pain vanished instantly, replaced by an incredible feeling of lightness, as if my spirit were gently detaching itself from my physical body. From above, I could see my motionless, pale body on the cell floor. It was strange, but not frightening. It was like taking off a heavy jacket after a long journey. My body had been my vehicle here on Earth, but now I no longer needed it. Suddenly, I found myself walking along a path of golden light that stretched before me like a luminous carpet. The air was different, pure, refreshing, filled with a fragrance reminiscent of all the most beautiful flowers in the world, combined in a perfect symphony. Each step I took filled me with an energy and vitality I had never experienced on Earth. The path led me to a garden that defied any earthly description. The trees stretched towards an impossibly blue sky, their leaves shimmering with a light that seemed to come from within, not from the sun. The flowers were more vibrant than anything I had ever seen in Iran. The colors were so intense, they seemed to have a life of their own. A river of crystal-clear water meandered through the garden, and its sound was like a celestial melody that made my soul want to dance. I approached the bank and saw that the water was not only transparent, it radiated a soft light that illuminated the precious stones in the riverbed. But the most incredible thing wasn't the beauty of the place. It was the presence that filled every inch of that space. It was love in its purest form, a peace that surpassed all understanding, a joy that made my whole being want to burst into praise. It was the presence of God himself, so palpable that I could almost touch it. That's when I saw him. Jesus walked toward me through the garden, his steps seeming to bless the very earth beneath his feet. His face was exactly as I had imagined it during my years of faith, yet at the same time it was completely different. No painting or icon had captured the light that radiated from his eyes, the love that emanated from his smile, the majesty that enveloped his entire presence. His clothes were white as freshly fallen snow, but with a gleam that didn't blind. It comforted. On his wrists and feet, I could see the nail mark, but they weren't wounds. They were scars of glory, shining reminders of the price he had for my salvation. "Darius, my faithful servant," he said, and his voice was like the sound of many waters, yet intimate like a whisper of love. "You have run the race well. You have kept the faith, even in the fire of persecution." I approached him with tears of joy streaming down my face. Each step I took toward his presence multiplied the peace in my heart. When I finally stood before him, his eyes met mine with such profound love that I felt as if he were looking into my soul and finding everything perfect, everything forgiven, everything redeemed. "Sir," I managed to say, "I died without finishing the work. I left my brothers alone. The network we built." Jesus smiled, and that smile contained all the comfort. "Your work on earth was beautiful, but your true work is only beginning." He reached out toward the garden that stretched before us. "This is your eternal home, prepared for you since the foundation of the world." We walked together along paths of light, passing trees that whispered praises and flowers that radiated adoration. Jesus showed me mansions that shone like jewels, each designed with perfect love for its inhabitants. "In my Father's house are many rooms," he said, reminding me of the words I had read so many times in the Gospel of John. We arrived at a place where the garden opened up to a panoramic view of the city, descending from the sky like a bride adorned for her husband. The walls were of jasper, the gates of pearls, the streets of gold as transparent as crystal. The glory of God illuminated, and the Lamb was its light. "It's beautiful," I whispered, enraptured by the magnificence unfolding before my eyes. "Yes," Jesus replied, "but it is not yet time for you to fully end. There is something more you need to see, something more you need to understand." He took me to a high place in the garden, from where we could see not only the sky, but also the earth far below, in the distance. I could see my motionless body in the prison cell. I could see the guards finally discovering my condition. I could see the commotion my departure was causing, but Jesus drew my attention to something else. I could see my brothers and sisters in faith in Tehran, gathered in secret homes, praying fervently for my release. I saw Mehdi in his workshop carving crosses with tears in his eyes. I saw Nasreen leading a clandestine Bible study, her face shining with determination. I saw Reza comforting new converts, his wisdom a balm to their fears. "Look," Jesus said, "your work is not finished with you. The seeds you planted are sprouting. The disciples you made are making more disciples. Your testimony will spread far beyond what you could imagine." Then he showed me something that filled me with amazement. I saw my own story stretching into the future, my testimony being shared, first whispered in Tehran, then traveling to other countries, finally reaching hearts around the world. I saw people in distant places reading about my experience and finding courage for their own faith. "But Lord," I said, "they need me. The persecution will intensify. They will need leadership." Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and his touch filled my whole being with an indescribable warmth. "My power is made perfect in weakness. My church is built not only by the living, but also by the testimony of those who were faithful unto death. Your departure will not weaken your brothers and sisters. On the contrary, it will strengthen them." Then he showed me a vision of the future. I saw the underground Christian network in Iran growing exponentially, fueled by the witness of my faithfulness. I saw young Iranians risking their lives to distribute Bibles, inspired by the story of the engineer who chose to remain faithful. I saw churches abroad praying specifically for Iran, moved by my account of the experience. "Your life was the seed," Jesus explained. "Your faithfulness and suffering was the water. Your departure will be the harvest." As I contemplated these visions, a profound understanding began to fill my mind. My work on earth wasn't just about distributing Bibles or making conversions. It was about demonstrating that the love of Christ was stronger than persecution, more powerful than torture, more enduring than death itself. My testimony would become a seed that would bear fruit for generations. But then Jesus continued, "It is not yet your time to remain here permanently." His words surprised me. "Isn't it my time?" "But Lord, my heart has stopped. My body, 7 minutes," he said with a smile that held eternal mystery. "In earthly time, 7 minutes have passed since your heart stopped. But here in eternity, we've had time for this entire conversation, for these visions, for this understanding." He led me back to the edge of the garden, where the path of light that had brought me there shone softly. "You must return, Darius. Your work on earth is not finished. There are more seeds to plant, more testimonies to give, more lives to touch." "But Lord," I protested, "this place is so beautiful. Your presence is all I've ever wanted. How can I leave?" Jesus looked at me with eyes full of infinite understanding. "This is not goodbye. It's a promise. This place will be yours forever. But first, there is still work to be done. Return knowing that I will always be with you until the end of time. Take with you the memory of this place, the strength of this experience." He placed his hands on my head, and I felt as if I were being filled with a new energy, a new purpose, a new authority. "Go and bear witness to what you have seen. Tell my servants that persecution is not the end, but the beginning. That suffering is not abandonment, but closeness to my heart. That death is not defeat, but victory." Then he spoke the words that would forever be etched on my soul. "You haven't finished my work yet." The return was like waking from a dream, but in reverse. Instead of waking up to reality from a dream, I was returning to the dream from reality. I felt my spirit reunite with my physical body, like putting on a coat that no longer fit properly after having experienced complete freedom. The first sound I heard was the urgent beep of a machine, followed by agitated voices speaking rapidly in Farsi. "His pulse is returning. Call the doctor." "It can't be. He was dead." Voices mingled in a chorus of confusion and astonishment. I slowly opened my eyes, adjusting to the bright artificial light of the hospital. I was in a bed connected to several machines that monitored every function of my body. The contrast with the celestial garden was so stark that, for a moment, I wondered if the experience had been real or a hallucination induced by lack of oxygen. But then I remembered Jesus' words. I felt the weight of his mission in my heart, and knew with absolute certainty that I had been in the presence of the King of the universe. The physical marks of torture were still on my body, but there was a new strength in my spirit, an authority that came from having walked with Christ in eternity. A doctor approached my bedside, his face showing a mixture of professional bewilderment and genuine astonishment. "Mr. Josini," he said gently, "officially, you were clinically dead for 7 minutes. Your heart stopped completely. There was no detectable brain activity. From a medical standpoint, your recovery is inexplicable." The following days in the hospital were a whirlwind of medical examinations, discreet interrogations by the authorities, and surprise visits from my family. My mother cried for hours when she saw me awake, her tears falling onto my hands as she whispered prayers of gratitude. My father, though relieved that I had survived, was deeply disturbed by the circumstances of my arrest. "Is what they're saying true?" he asked me one afternoon when we were alone in the hospital room. "Did you really convert to Christianity?" "Yes, Father," I replied without hesitation. "But more than that, I found the truth. I found Jesus, and he found me, even in death." His eyes filled with tears that he refused to let fall. "I don't understand. My son, raised in a devout Muslim family, how could he choose this path?" "Father," I said, holding his hand, "it wasn't a rejection of everything you taught me about seeking God. It was the fulfillment of that search. All the good you planted in me prepared me to recognize the truth when I found it." The authorities, perplexed by my miraculous survival and perhaps intimidated by the medical attention my case had attracted, made an unexpected decision: to release me on strict probation. The conditions were clear. I could not engage in missionary activities, I could not meet with other known Christians, and I had to report regularly to the authorities. But they had a problem. They couldn't silence what I had experienced. My 7-minute story spread like wildfire through the underground Christian community. Then it leaked to wider circles, and eventually reached international Christian organizations that were monitoring religious persecution in Iran. On my first night back home after my liberation, I sat in my room contemplating the moonlit Alborz mountain. The contrast between this world and the heavenly garden I had seen was striking, but the presence of Jesus that I had felt there did not leave. I knew he was with me, exactly as he had promised. Reza was the first of my brothers in faith who risked visiting me. He arrived late at night, using counter-surveillance techniques that we had developed during our years of clandestine ministry. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Brother," he whispered, "we thought we'd lost you forever when we heard your heart had stopped. I'm here for a reason." And then I recounted the whole experience. Every detail of the garden, every word of Jesus, every vision of the future. Reza listened with growing astonishment, occasionally wiping away tears of emotion. "You haven't finished my work yet," he repeated when I finished my story. "Brother, this isn't just for you. It's a message for the entire church in Iran." He was right. In the weeks that followed, despite official restrictions, I found creative ways to share my testimony. I couldn't openly distribute Bibles or lead Bible studies, but I could tell my story. And my story became the most powerful gospel I ever preached. In casual encounters at cafes, during seemingly normal conversations with neighbors, at follow-up medical appointments, I shared what I had seen. I was clinically dead for 7 minutes, I would say, and I can testify that there is life after death, that Jesus is real, that heaven exists. The authority that came from having actually been dead and returned to life was undeniable. People listened to my testimony with an attention I had never experienced. Doctors, nurses, government officials, bazaar merchants. Everyone wanted to hear the story of the man who had crossed the veil between life and death. Mehdi was one of the first to come and see me secretly. His face was marked by weeks of worry and intense prayer. "Brother Darius," he said, his voice trembling, "when we learned that you had been arrested, tortured, and that your heart had stopped, we thought it was all over. Some brothers wanted to flee, to hide. And what did you say to them?" I asked. "I told them to remember his words, that Jesus had promised to be with us until the end of time. But I confess," his eyes filled with tears, "my own faith wavered. But now, seeing you here, hearing what you've experienced, my faith has not only been restored, it has multiplied." The underground Christian network, far from disintegrating after my arrest and apparent death, began to grow with renewed intensity. My testimony became the catalyst for a silent but powerful revival. Believers who had previously lived in fear found new courage. Non-believers who heard the story began to question their beliefs. Nasrin organized study groups focused specifically on the hope of eternal life. "If Darius could see heaven and return," she told the groups, "then everything we believe is true. Persecution is not the end. It is merely the path to glory." The story began to spread beyond Iran's borders. International Christian organizations documented my experience, and soon I began receiving messages from brothers and sisters in faith in distant countries. My testimony was encouraging persecuted Christians in China, strengthening missionaries in hostile countries, and renewing the faith of complacent believers in the West. A particularly touching letter came from a brother in North Korea who had heard my story on a clandestine radio broadcast. "Brother Darius," Your testimony reached us at exactly the moment we needed to hear it, to know that our suffering has an eternal purpose. His 7 minutes in paradise gave us courage for years of faithful service, but my new mission did not come without challenges. The authorities, though unable to arrest me again without apparent reason, intensified their surveillance. They knew that something had changed, that my influence had grown rather than diminished after my imprisonment. Commander Muradi summoned me for an informal conversation 6 months after my release. The meeting took place in a regular government office, but the message was clear. They were still watching me. "Mr. Josini," he said in that same cold voice I remembered from the torture session, "we've noticed an increase in Christian activity since your release. Do you have anything to say about that?" "Commander," I replied with a calmness that surprised even myself, "I can only testify to what I've lived through. If my story inspires others to seek the truth, that's their decision, not my manipulation." His face hardened. "His story is a trauma-induced hallucination. The doctors confirm it. Lack of oxygen can cause vivid, but completely false, experience." "And how do you explain my knowledge of events that occurred while I was unconscious?" I asked. "During my experience, I saw things happening in different parts of Tehran at the same time. Details that the doctors later confirmed." Muradi had no answer for that, and we both knew it. My testimony had an authority that couldn't be refuted simply with medical explanations. There were supernatural elements that defied his attempts at rationalization. As the months passed, my ministry transformed. I was no longer the secret distributor of Bibles I had been before. Now, I was something more powerful, a living witness to the reality of heaven. My very presence became a testimony, my story, a living apologetic for the Christian faith. I established new methods of evangelization that were technically within the limits of my probation. Instead of distributing literature, I shared my personal experience. Instead of organizing formal meetings, I held individual conversations that frequently led to spontaneous conversions. One day, a young doctor from the hospital where I had been treated asked me for a private meeting. "Mr. Josini," he said nervously, "I've reviewed your medical records dozens of times. What happened to you defies all known medical explanations. But beyond that, there's something in your eyes, in the way you talk about your experience, that tells me it's true." This conversation resulted in the conversion of Dr. Amir Bakhtiari, who later became one of the most effective leaders of the underground church, using his position at the hospital to minister to both patients and colleagues. The second anniversary of my near-death experience came with a profound reflection on the fulfillment of Jesus' words, "You have not yet finished my work." The underground Christian network had grown from 50 members to over 300 in Tehran alone, with active cells in Isfahan, Shiraz, and Mashhad. But this growth also attracted increased attention from the authorities. Police raids intensified. Several of my brothers were arrested. However, something had fundamentally changed in the persecuted church in Iran. They no longer feared death as before. My testimony had planted a seed of eternal assurance that transformed them. The believers faced persecution with supernatural courage. During that time, I received an unexpected visit that would change everything. It was a winter afternoon when my mother entered my room with tears in her. "Darius," she said softly, "I've been reading." In her hands trembled a Bible in Farsi. My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't one I had distributed, but one she had obtained on her own. "After seeing you return from the dead," she continued, "after hearing your story again and again, I couldn't ignore the questions. I received this from a woman at the market, a Christian who knew your story." Her tears fell onto the open pages. "My son, I found the peace I saw in your eyes." That night, in the privacy of our home, I had the privilege of leading my own mother in a prayer of surrender to Jesus. It was one of the most memorable moments of my life, to see the woman who taught me to pray find the fullness of that pursuit in Christ. My father took longer, but the silent witness of my mother's transformation and my own resurrection eventually melted away his resistance. 6 months later, he too knelt before Jesus, whispering, "If my son's God is powerful enough to bring him back from the dead, then he is also mine." My parents' conversion marked a turning point in my ministry. I was no longer just the man who had seen heaven. Now I was the son who had brought heaven into our home. Our house became a discreet center of worship, where other Muslim parents came secretly to hear how they could maintain their faith while following Jesus. However, I knew my time in Iran was running out. The pressure from the government was mounting. I had received direct threats from extremist groups who considered my testimony an affront to Islam. One night, while praying in my room, I again felt the tangible presence of Jesus. "It's time to expand your territory," I heard in my heart. "There are brothers and sisters in other nations who need to hear what you have seen." 3 months later, with the help of international Christian organizations, I was able to leave Iran as a religious refugee. The departure was painful, leaving my newly converted family, the church that had grown, the land where I was born both physically and spiritually. But Jesus' words proved prophetic. From my new home in exile, my testimony has reached places I never imagined. I have preached in churches from Stockholm to São Paulo, from Los Angeles to Lagos. Everywhere, the story of the 7 minutes in heaven resonates with supernatural power. I saw Muslims in Turkey give their hearts to Christ after hearing my story. I comforted families of martyrs in Syria with the assurance that their loved ones are in the garden I saw. I strengthened missionaries in closed countries with the reality that their work has eternal consequences. But perhaps the most powerful effect was on the Iranian church in exile. Thousands of my countrymen who fled persecution gathered when my testimony reached their communities. Many had lost hope, thinking that God had abandoned them. My story reminded them that He never abandons us, that even in death, He is with us. Today, as I recount this from my new home, I know that my work is not yet finished. The underground network in Iran continues to grow, fueled by the testimony I regularly receive letters from brothers and sisters who risk everything to write to me, telling me about new conversions, churches multiplying, young people distributing Bibles inspired by my story. My mother, now a discreet leader in the underground women's church, recently wrote to me, "Son, now I understand why you had to come back. It wasn't just for us. It was for all those who would come after us." The experience of those 7 minutes changed not only my eternity, but my understanding of time itself. Every day I live now is a gift. Every conversation, an opportunity to sow eternal seeds. Every testimony, a declaration that death does not have the last word. When people ask me if I miss heaven after having seen it, I always answer, I don't miss heaven because I know it awaits me, but I've learned to love this world more deeply because I understand its purpose. We are ambassadors of that kingdom, called to bring pieces of heaven to earth. The torture I endured in Evan prison left scars on my body that will never completely disappear. But these marks have become daily reminders that suffering for Christ is not punishment. It is participation in His nature. Every physical pain reminds me of the price He paid. Every hardship draws me closer to His heart. My scars have also become credentials. When I speak in comfortable churches in the West, the marks of torture validate my message in a way that words alone could not. When I comfort persecuted brothers and sisters, my wounds speak a language that transcends cultures. The vision Jesus showed me of my testimony spreading throughout the world has been fulfilled in ways that surpass my wildest dreams. My story has been translated into dozens of languages, shared at missionary conferences, and even broadcast on radio programs that reach countries closed to the gospel. But beyond the geographical, what surprised me most was the depth of the impact. I received testimonies from people who encountered Christ directly after hearing my story. Families were reconciled. Addicts found freedom. People with suicidal thoughts found hope. All because they heard that there is life after death, and that this life is beautiful. A particularly touching testimony came from a woman in Afghanistan who had lost her husband and children in an attack. "Brother Darius," she wrote, "when I heard your story on a clandestine radio broadcast, I knew that my loved ones are in the garden you saw. For the first time since they left, I was able to smile." These testimonies constantly remind me why I needed to return from that beautiful place. It wasn't for my own glory or satisfaction. It was to be a bridge between heaven and earth, to bring hope to the desperate, to show that Jesus' promises are real and reliable. The question I am most often asked is whether I regret returning, whether I wouldn't have preferred to remain in the presence of Jesus. My answer is always the same. In the heavenly garden, I experienced perfect love. But now I have the opportunity to be a channel of that love for others. He didn't send me back to distance me from heaven, but to bring heaven with me. Every day I pray for my brothers and sisters who remain in Iran. Some continue to risk everything to spread the word of God. I pray for those who are in prison, some being tortured as I was. But I pray with renewed authority, knowing that no suffering is in vain, that every tear is seen, that every drop of blood shed for the gospel waters seeds that will produce eternal fruit. I also pray for my former tormentors, including Commander Murati. I know these prayers may seem strange, but in the heavenly garden I understood that Jesus' love extends even to those who persecute His church. I pray that they too may experience the transforming grace that changed my heart. My story continues to be written every day through conferences, books, personal testimonies, and digital media. The message continues to spread. There is life after death. Jesus is real. Heaven is beautiful, and it's worth any sacrifice to be there. But perhaps the most important thing I've learned is that heaven is not just our future destination, it's our present reality. When we walk with Jesus, when we live in obedience to His word, when we love as He loved, we are already participating in heavenly life. The garden I saw is not separated from us by death. It is separated only by the veil of our limited perspective. Every act of love, every gesture of forgiveness, Every moment of genuine worship connects us to that eternal reality. We are citizens of heaven, temporarily living on earth, and our mission is to make this earth more like the heaven we saw. My name is Darius. For years I distributed Bibles in Tehran. Today, I am a witness to eternal reality, an ambassador of the heavenly King, a man who saw the face of Jesus and returned to tell the story. My heart stopped for 7 minutes, but my story stretches into eternity. The words Jesus spoke to me in that garden resonate as clearly today as the day I heard them. You have not yet finished my work, and as long as I have breath in my lungs and strength in my body, I will continue to fulfill this sacred mission, knowing that each day brings me closer to the moment when I can finally stay forever in that wonderful place. Until then, I'll keep running the race, fighting the good fight, keeping the faith, and inviting others to join me on this journey toward the eternal home that awaits us.